How are things going there this morning? And is there anything in particular that you would like to talk or ask me about? Or
there's a ton of stuff we're going to jump into. I mean, I just want to start, and usually we jump into just a lot of issues that are going on right now. I'd love to do that with you here today. By the way, if you'd like to call in to talk to Don Hooper this hour, please feel free to. Number here is 866-371-1270. We'll take calls for Don all hour at 866-371-1270. You got to give me your thoughts on the Elena Kagan hearings, at least what you've caught so far. I know you're busy and they probably don't catch everything, but how in the world could somebody who is a nominee for the Supreme Court being asked, are you a legal progressive, when they're asking what kind of legal philosophy she is? How could she looks at the Senator, I don't know what that means. Oh my gosh, well, if you don't know what that means, I don't know if I want you in the Supreme Court. What do you think, Don?
Well, I think that she doesn't have enough experience to be on the Supreme Court, and she hasn't even been a judge before, so that's a lifetime position, and we've got to be more careful about putting people into a place like that. I know that she's probably going to be railroaded right through whether we like it or not. But still, I think that the Republicans should put out every effort that they possibly can to keep it from happening, even if it means a filibuster. That's perfectly fine with me, because she's too young, and of all of the criticism, I mean, of the U.S. Constitution, I have no criticism whatsoever. It's a founding document. But that one thing about the Supreme Court being a lifetime appointees has disturbed me for a long, long time.
Yeah, and I can see why. I mean, they didn't expect people to still. Number one, they didn't live this long in the Founders' Day, so they were going based on what they saw at the time, and that was I guess when you write something like the Constitution, it's amazing the thing is held up as well as it has, if you think about it. We had some very forward-thinking people, but one thing they could not have figured on is the fact that our medical technology would have improved to the point where people would live into 80s and 90s is, I don't want to say typical, but certainly it's not unusual anymore for that to happen, for example. And look at the Supreme Court nominees. We have a lot of people up in their 80s. And so with that in mind, what would the founders do today? Would they change that a little bit? You've got to wonder sometimes.
Oh, I have no doubt about it that they'd change it, and they'd probably change a few other things too. But when it was written, it was a kind of a broad document, thinking that, succeeding generations would be wise enough to put the details into the matter. Like the Second Amendment, for example, it was very, very general when it was written, but of course it meant that we have a right to arm ourselves and protect ourselves, but they never got down to the finer details, and so the left has always taken advantage of that, and they've done whatever they can to analyze it and give their opinion of what the true meaning of it was, and half of the time I can't even understand how they feel about some of these things.
Well, and I think they mean it that way too. That's why these things are written in such a massive language scale. I've said before, and I'll say again, I think we ought to take Congress and say that every bill, with the exception of budget, because there's a lot to cover there, I guess, but even that I wish we could do better, but everything except for budget ought to be down to 100 pages, and if you guys can get below 100 pages, we'll give you a commission of some kind to make sure that you stay that way.
Even 100 pages is very long.
Agreed, but it's a start. I'm thinking of these 2,000 and 3,000 pages, and NAFTA and GATT, that was 28,000. I mean, that's what's coming in my mind with that.
Yeah. It's really a power grab more than anything. Every time that they put out there a bill and they get some lawyers working on it, there are other intents of passing these bills, and that's why I think that I like that Enumerations Power Act that was written by a congressman down in Arizona, and of all places, and he said that if you're going to put anything into a law, you should have to prove that it will fit into the Constitution. And they're not doing that at all. I mean, 2,750 pages for a bill is ridiculous, and there's no way that they can prove that that's going to fit into the Constitution.
Indeed. Let's go ahead and grab a call that'd like to join in. You can, too. 866-371-1270 is the number. You can email. Go to WMKT, thetalkstation.com. Click on Contacts. That's the email that comes directly to the studio. And Facebook chat is up right now. I'd like to talk to you at WMKT. Phone call right now. You're on the air with Don Hooper. Hi.
Good morning, Greg and Don. Don, I'm down in Antrim County, and I'm ready and able to put any signage up for you. I can't afford to do it myself. I can put it up, but I can't afford to buy it, and I know that your funds are limited. Bennett chick got the lump sum of it. It looks like the party politics are in play here to push him and Jason Allen into the limelight again. I haven't seen any Jason Allen, so he must be playing the political game that most of them do, because during the Palin or during the presidential election, none of their signs were up. Ron Paul signs were everywhere, and that was during the primary. And of course, you know, the electronic voting machines came into play there, I think, and I think that's going to come into play with this election, which at that time, if it does happen, I think that everyone should be doing, what do they call it, a recall on or a recount? And that's what I was advised by a lady who has done researching on voting fraud. But I wish people out there would start giving you some financial support. I know that you were instrumental in getting Benechek information. He was very uninformed as to how to run for office from talking with you, and I know you're not going to really probably do any dirt on anybody, but you mentioned to me that he came to you without having any background, didn't vote, and wasn't even involved in politics. And I feel the last person we need in office is another doctor or lawyer, unless it's Dr. Ron Paul, of course, or his sons. These lawyers are the 90% of the people in office today in Washington are lawyers, so of course they're going to put another person in place that's right along their thinking. And our system today doesn't follow the Constitution, because the system is run like a corporation, because it is a corporation, where the courts are administrative tribunals, and we're under maritime law, and that's been since the 30s when the Constitution was suspended. So
we're going to have to explain that a little bit if we're going to go into that, because the thing is that what you just said, the majority of the public, although I think more and more are getting it, is still very confusing to people. It's like, what, a corporation, maritime law? And I think they glaze over sometimes. Don, you've probably seen that yourself. It's tough to make that point that of the seriousness of where this country has been taken, and explain it to so many people who are new to the political process, who are hungry and want to know, but it becomes confusing quickly because they're not sure what they're hearing.
Yeah. While we're talking about it, he brought up a lot of interesting points. Now, as long as we're talking about the Ron Paul people, I'd like to take advantage of this, and if anyone has connections with the Ron Paul people, I'd like for them to make connection with me. And the reason being, I'm the closest thing to Ron Paul and his philosophy that's available to the people in Michigan right now. And now that Linda Goldthorpe is backed out of it, I would like to make a connection with them and get their support, because I do agree with most everything that Ron Paul has said. I have a little bit of a discrepancy as far as his foreign policy, but that can all be ironed out. So if anyone is listening to the Ron Paul people, I'd very much appreciate a connection with them.
Fellows, hold that thought, though. I've got to check the forecast just real quick. Let's do a quick weather news, and we'll continue right where we left off there. So